What is the difference between the seeing, the talking, and the dating stage? So everybody on the podcast today, I have Charlotte, Dating by Charlotte. I met her on TikTok. And what's pretty cool is that you're in Austin and I'm in San Antonio.
Yeah.
You're practically a neighbor.
Hey, neighbor, not too far away from you. Love San Antonio. I remember blanking what restaurant it was. It's over at the Pearl. But really love a restaurant over there.
La Gloria.
It's the one. It's like the Southern comfort food. It's what I really enjoyed it.
Okay, that wasn't it. So everybody, I saw her, and what I love about her platform, one, she talks about dating, right? And she's a Texan, so that's already 2 wins there. But what really won me over, and why I reached out to you, Charlotte, is I love your presentations, because people don't know this, but my profession outside of TikTok, right? My real job, I'm an instructional designer.
Nice.
And I work with PowerPoints and adult learning all day, and I see your PowerPoints and I'm like, this is amazing. I got to reach out and talk to her.
Nice. Well, I had no idea. And in my kind of career, I work with people who do what you do and have the utmost respect for it. Kind of where the background is for what I've been doing, making the dating relationship related PowerPoints. I guess to kind of give the origin story to go all the way back, because it doesn't make sense without the full story. Probably about a year ago-ish to this day, was at brunch with a few girlfriends. We were retelling old stories, mimosas in the center of the table, of course. And so I think we were telling back an old story, and I reference one of my friends, hey, remember, the one guy you dated, Phil? It was, someone that, a year or two back, she dated for, my opinion, a month of, dates, hanging out. It just didn't materialize into a relationship or anything. But my opinion, that's dating. He was her date to our company holiday party. She quickly interrupted me to say, we never dated. We were never boyfriend, girlfriend. Like that's not dating. We were just talking, and it turned into this whole debate on the at the brunch table, saying like, "No, you were going on. You were going on dates consistently. That's dating. No, it's talking." And then it ended with agree to disagree. And I just can't stand agree to disagree. I'm pretty stubborn. So I went home and it was just a notebook at the time. It's popped up in TikTok, and I drew this timeline of this is the talking stage. That's that window of time before that first date takes place when you're kind of planning things logistically. But once you're going on dates, you're dating. That doesn't mean you're in a relationship yet. And so to get buy-in from the world and prove her wrong, I made a TikTok of it. I downloaded TikTok at the beginning of the pandemic just for fun. I think I did like kind of goofy things here and there, like house tour stuff, nothing that ever caught on. But I think there was some viral influencer type who stitched the video and was like, hey, like, I've never called this a talking stage. It was really Gen Z versus millennial. I almost want to say like Gen Z really wants to call that a talking stage. But yeah, and I had, a couple, like I think 100,000 views. And I was kind of like, I'm in digital marketing as a career, which kind of comes into the next part.
It's all coming together. Yeah.
And I was kind of like, maybe there's something here. TikTok is supposed to be this like next big thing. I would kind of love to learn about like the algorithm and see like if it would be helpful from a business standpoint. Why not run with this? And then, but didn't really know what to do next. But then like the next week, maybe next week or so later, another brunch table, another mimosa conversation. Girlfriend was telling a story about how she'd been ghosted. But then once she continued to tell the story, I realized it's just someone who stopped talking to her on a dating app. My opinion of ghosting, like when I hear ghosting, I think of, someone you've been getting to know, them pretty well. And all of a sudden they sneak off into the night, effectively becoming a ghost, and you never hear from them again. And so, but if it's someone you stop talking to on a dating app, or someone maybe you didn't reach out to, like, isn't that like a fizzle, or isn't that just something not coming to fruition? So that started like a discussion, and I was like, I could make a TikTok of this, and I got the same notebook out, and it was like, I don't know how, like, I was trying to do an XY axis where it's like the more serious you are, the less effort you have to put in, and then when does it become ghosting? Because my opinion, it takes 2 to be ghosted. And I was like, I don't know how to do this on one little composition book. I'm going to go get my computer. I'm in digital marketing as a career, and I had all these templates that I would use for PowerPoint presentations and whatnot. And I said, this will work. And then as I was kind of putting everything together, I was like, maybe this could be all done in a PowerPoint format. And that got a bunch of views. People really liked it. They said, this is kind of different. And I was like, I think we've got a niche on our hands. So that kind of really inspired it. It was something where at the time, it helped me with like my presentation skills, like at work. So I would do it like in the morning before I started working, like at 7 a.m. and stuff, and it would warm up my voice. And I would really go off of dating topics. Like I definitely have found a trend with like all these crazy buzzwords we all use to describe things that mean something different to everyone, that are so emotionally charged. You know, what do they mean? And not so much what do they mean, but what could they mean? Here it is on a spectrum. Like, you know, what everyone has their own definition of casual, and it exists on a spectrum. To some people, it's a one night stand. To other people, it's a, you know, feels like a relationship, but it's missing the title. So a lot of my content has revolved around that and kind of those like modern dating isms. And I've had a lot of fun with it. I'll go off audience feedback. If there's something in the New York Times about a certain dating trend, I'll go off that. Sometimes I'll do like stitches about a viral situation where someone wasn't all that nice to another. But I like to have fun with it. One thing too is I really hate like the gender war side of things. I think, anyone of any gender can be ghosted. I think dating's hard for everybody, and everyone, you know, kind of issues can be different. I think also just issues are different depending on your personality. It's not necessarily just tied to gender.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And so I really have kind of tried to make things as gender neutral as possible, like 60-40 female to male audience, which has been nice. But yeah, I'm just anti-asshole versus, you know, pro one particular gender. So that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So that's kind of me and the
here you are.
The land.
And your profile, you're approaching 100,000 followers on TikTok, right?
I hope I will get there soon. Yeah, I've kind of it's kind of had a lull in the last like week or so, but hopefully I can climb up there in the meantime.
Oh, you will definitely. So, and that's when I found you. It's the talking stage versus the scene stage versus the dating stage. Now, for me, you said you followed me. So if you don't know my story, like I again started dating in 2016 after 16 years of marriage, and I didn't know how dating was. And I had a lot of female friends in the corporate space, and they told me, you know, it's different now. You know, if you're just talking to somebody, you're not dating. And I'm like, what do you mean? So, cause I came from the old days. If you went out with somebody and the date went well on a Friday and you asked them, well, let's do something Saturday, they were committed to you, almost like an exclusive type of agreement. But that wasn't the case. I went out with a lot of women on Fridays and asked them, let's do it again tomorrow. No, I have plans. And that was the norm because there was no exclusivity. We were just talking. She didn't know me from anybody. And that was really, it wasn't a tough adjustment for me, but I had to understand that just because you matched on a dating app and you're talking and exchanging a conversation and maybe go on one date doesn't mean you're dating. It just means you're seeing them. And I'm like, okay, I'm not making up these rules. I'm going with the flow. And it was never a clear definition of seeing, talking, and dating. And when I saw your presentation with the PowerPoint, I'm like, this is perfect. Because anybody coming out of a marriage and divorce and going out to the dating world, it's so confusing because it's a different era. It's a different age. It's just so fast to sync up with people. It's so, I never thought like texting would be my first impression. I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Goodness.
So so if you don't mind, go into details for those who are like maybe about to start dating after divorce, or maybe those who are, you know, in their prime and they're ready to get back out there. What is the difference between the seeing, the talking, and the dating stage?
Yeah. And just to give, some clarification on my definitions. I'm not a big fan of just in general of calling someone that you are actively going on dates with, just talking. I think it's a way to kind of downplay, you know, what is meaningful, which is you're getting to know someone, you're going on dates. And I think we've kind of made dating this big, scary word that we're trying to avoid. And I think that almost
we've overcomplicated it.
Exactly. So I'm not afraid. I think when you are actively going on dates, I would call that dating. I think it's not a word to be afraid of. I do think dating is a synonym for seeing, because some people say, well, what about seeing? Is it seeing then dating? I always say, and I do think it has less of a scary sound to it. I could totally see using that. I just see it as more of a synonym.
Okay.
And then I've always seen talking is that window of time before that first date takes place. And I mean, that could be longer than others, depending on your situation or how you met. I think if you met someone on a dating app and you say, oh, hey, we're both free tomorrow. You maybe had a one-day talking stage. If it's someone you knew through work and you kind of had a flirty back and forth because you were both too scared to say aloud that you have feelings for each other and you kind of do flirty things back and forth that aren't really dates just yet, maybe you're talking for a lot longer. So that is my take. There is definitely a group of people who will say that if you are not, that dating is a synonym for an exclusive, committed, established relationship because they think dating sounds like a very strong word to them.
Like we're exclusive now. Like I'm dating somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, my personal take on multi-dating and being exclusive or not, I do think you can date multiple people at once, but I also think that as a whole, like naturally in the right situation, that should drop off. And I think by default you should almost like be exclusive before you put a label on it. I think when you date somebody, that's your trial run to be in a relationship with them and to really know what it goes into being in a relationship with them. You should have some period of getting to know them without any other distraction around you. As in you're going on dates, you're not looking down at your phone saying, oh, is that other person going to text me? I do think like that kind of, letting, if you are seeing another person or two, like in the early stages, you're 1-2 dates in, you don't really know yet, no big deal. But if you've really kind of picked one person, let the other people drop off.
Right. And that's what I was taught. They said it's a numbers game. You want to date at least maybe 3 or 4 people, talk to them, and then kind of filter out. It's a numbers game. So go ahead and just filter out who you want to take seriously. But it takes a while. It's not an overnight process is what they told me. I'm like, well, fine. So that's when I started well, to me, this is how I saw it. If I'm talking to you via text and we go out on one date, I didn't say we were dating. This is just a definition they taught me and what I kind of learned. And again, there's no set definition. That's why I wanted you on here. Totally. So if you go talk to somebody and you go on a date, I didn't see that as dating. I said that we're like, I'm seeing somebody, we're seeing somebody. And talking was just talking, nothing like romantic. It was just, we go on dates, but it's just fun. But if there was anything intimate, that's the scene area. And then dating is when you chose who you wanted to date exclusively. So dating, from what I learned was that's the last definition of the whole process. It's you're seeing people, you're talking to them, and you're filtering who you want to take seriously. And there may be some intimacy with numerous people while you're talking to other people. It's crazy. I didn't like it, but I adjusted to it pretty fast. But dating didn't take the title until you were selected. Like, I select you. Just FYI, I'm not seeing anybody else, and I'd like to see where this goes. That's kind of where it became quote unquote official. But even at that point, when I chose people, there were women saying, I like you, but I have trip plans next month with a friend of mine that we planned 6 months ago. So I don't know how you're going to feel about that. So what is that? It's kind of such a gray and confusing area. Such
a gray area. And I think, there's so many factors and distractions now that can really, I think, impact somebody's decisions. You also hear too, like that conversation where you reveal to the other person, hey, I'm going to focus on this. I'm not seeing anybody else. I'm going to delete the dating apps. Yes. To some people that comes separately than, okay, now we are in a relationship. We're going to call each other boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, whatever. To a lot of people, like if you don't put that, part into the conversation, they just see you as exclusive, but not necessarily in a relationship yet.
Right.
So that's another thing too, is it's like, you almost have to make sure that you specify that in the conversation. Otherwise, you're not technically in a relationship.
Yeah, it's so confusing. And now, again, I'm engaged, right? So I'm not dating anymore. All my dating life was maybe 2015 to 2020, but now I hear they're introducing open relationships, which is also confusing. Like, people are agreeing up front, like, hey, we can be intimate, we can talk and go out, but we're open to date other people. I don't know how I feel about that, but that seems to be an ongoing thing or a new thing coming up. Have you seen that lately with your research?
I haven't. I do think that the kind of open relationship or like poly, type relationships have sort of been weaponized. I think people that are really truly interested in that are almost mathematical about it. Like they know what they want. They lead with it, knowing they might lose people. It's never something you sort of introduce or bait and switch people with. And it's not sort of a crutch to cheat or something like that. It's, two people, right. Hey, we have, different kind of sexual interests. We are in an open relationship and they have rules to it that are, not just one-sided. I also do think like those types of communities and whatnot, or those, types of relationships or interests. I feel like that's just something that would be tough for like an inexperienced dater to try. Like, I think I kind of have seen it with like, college kids and whatnot. It's like, like maybe just date multiple people and don't call it a relationship. But I think open relationship it's for people that, have had some relationship experience. They know what works for them, because there's just something that's, to have that, you have to really, know your relationship with sex and kind of, right. Be really emotionally intelligent because those are pretty complex. Yeah. And it can get pretty, I know on paper it sounds fun, but it can get pretty complicated pretty fast right away.
I had a friend of mine. She was separated from her husband. This is a couple years back, and she moved to Austin. And she said, Austin, there's a lot of polyamorous relationships. I went out on a date. The guy was married, and he was cool with it. She says it's really big in Austin. Every guy that hit on me, that's what it was. They had an open relationship. I'm like, so that's a big thing in Austin. This is what she told me a couple years ago.
I have one friend who has jokingly called herself the poly and swinger magnate. She's like, this is just everywhere.
Yeah.
I do think if you're on a dating app or something like that, you have to be upfront. Like if the people that are truly poly or whatever they identify as, there's different kind of labels they'll put on it. It's never something you should bait and switch people with it, or you're doing it wrong, or like weaponizing that. It's something you're supposed to be open with. Like, and if someone says no, you're supposed to get up and leave because they're big on consent.
Yeah, it's complicated. I never dove in that space, and I'm too. I know I couldn't handle it. I know I'm not like prepared to be. I guess my emotions to be tied or tethered to numerous people. I'm not built that way. Some people are, but I'm not. I guess I'm too
totally
old school.
The same way. Yeah. Because when I think of like dating, and I do think people can date multiple people, but it's not for everybody. Before you've called it a committed relationship, early stages, I think, of course, a few dates in, I think there's some people who see that as a way, to not have kind of like that sunken cost mindset all in on one person. I think it's a good way to kind of, measure this person against other people versus, kind of having tunnel vision on just one person. And then for some people, it's just, they really truly don't know yet. And it's a better way for them to date. Like for me, first I have ADHD. I would be too worried about like, mixing up a story. Oh, thanks. I'm terrified of like mixing up a story or calling someone the wrong name or something like that. Like that alone had kept me from kind of dating multiple people, like as just when I was like a single person. But yeah, at the same time, like if I had a date with someone and I wasn't totally excited about that person, there would not be another date. I think sometimes multi-daters are kind of like, oh, this person could be nice. And sometimes I wonder, did I ever let go of a good person too quickly because, maybe they're a slow burn type or it takes them a while to come out of their shell. So there's kind of pros and cons, I think, to both kind of styles of dating.
Yeah. And again, for me going out there, it was really messy. And I kind of want to get back to the talking stage and dating stage. So you said the dating per your definition, again, is like when you go on dates. So multiple dates with somebody. So that's when I guess there is exclusivity within that space and you're dating somebody, correct?
My definition of dating is actively going on dates. I do think kind of, the one first date that didn't materialize into something else, that was a person you went on one date with. It's that, you've been on, dates, you're continuing to, have, flirty back and forth. There seems to be other dates on the horizon. That's my definition of dating. Okay. I don't think it's something that I don't think you're necessarily exclusive with that person. I think some people just opt for, kind of that date one person, kind of by choice on their own terms. But I don't think it's, required. There's no implication of it. I think really nobody should assume exclusivity unless they've been told so.
Right.
But so that kind of, and that does kind of sound scary. Like if you say, oh, I'm dating multiple people, people will go like, what? And I think that's kind of the interest in talking. It sounds a lot less scary. Oh, yeah, I'm talking to a few people. But that's why I think calling it dating also makes people be more careful with that and not just be so reckless, which is where my definition comes in.
Yes, definitely. I can see where you're going with that. And to kind of revert, then the talking is just text conversations, right? That's when you match with somebody and you're just talking to them via your phone. Correct? I
think if it's a dating app match, absolutely. Or, some other, the person that DMs you on Instagram that found you because they live in your city. I do think if it's a situation where you met somebody in person, so you go out with your friends on a Friday, get somebody's number, that's a person you've met in person, and that kind of texting as you plan what's next. Yeah, I'd call that talking. Or, some people date people that they've been connected to a while. I mentioned like the coworker example and whatnot, where you might be hesitant to like really, pull the trigger on that. I think those are almost this. It's crazy because like those like connections that you've met in person are almost like those long talking stages where it's like, is this going to be anything? Like maybe, you kiss when nobody's looking at a party, but you haven't done a real date yet. Like that's kind of the things I would call talking.
Okay. And you don't have, is there a scene definition in your
I've always just thought, I've always thought it was just a synonym for dating, that I think does sound less scary. So I think like to me, it's the same thing.
Okay, got it.
Say like, earlier stages, I would call it, seeing if it was, 2 dates in, if, we're a month and a half in, just haven't had the conversation yet. Yeah. Call that dating. But to me, it's a synonym.
That makes sense. Okay. So now we're clear on that. So, and again, I'm glad we have a good definition because it gives people who are listening, who are about to go start dating after divorce, like an idea. And again, for me, I found it shocking because, again, going out there 39, I remember when I met a woman, every woman I met had a lot of guys, or like there's the concert guy, the guy who spoils them, the guy who gives the guy for sex. I mean, they had multiple guys that they were dating. I'm not saying every woman does this in the nation, but my experience, they were seeing multiple people. And I couldn't be upset about that because I just met this person. I'm entering their life now. So I can't judge or label anybody based on what they're doing now. And if I was worthy of maybe dating them exclusively, that slowly separated them from the process. So I remember, okay, this is the way the game is. Everybody has multiple people. They have a roster, as they call it, or a den, whatever they call it. There's so many stupid terms, but people had a lot of, I guess I don't want to say a lot of options of just there. Like there's the sex guy, there's the guy who takes me to movies, the guy who takes me to the concerts, and then there's a guy that boosts my confidence when I need him. I just saw that quite commonly with a lot of women, and guys did the same thing. And after a while, I did the same thing as well. So it's weird how that's really evident out there. People have just, I guess, I don't want to use the word roster. What would you use the word? What term would you use?
And I hate the term roster because it's you're not an NBA coach and whatnot. I think I think a more polite thing to call it would be like multi-dating. But I think
multi-dating, there you go.
If it is something where it's like very casual, like if you have someone that you're hooking up with, that's another thing. I believe that when you're actively going on dates, you're dating, you can have a casual situation that is not called dating. If, you're not doing the real dates, like someone coming over to your house to, watch a movie, that's not a date.
Yes. So that would be casual in your definition, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think like multi-dating is a nice thing to call it, isn't looking for anything serious. They're not tied down. I would usually use kind of those terms to describe that, or like, they're not in a rush. Like I would usually kind of use those euphemisms. I haven't come up with a definition for that, actually.
Well, the casual piece, I mean, again, this is old, the Netflix and chill. I guess that's what the definition was. Just like, hey, come over, watch a movie and let's just do that. So, but again, it is very complicated. And the ghosting piece, I saw your other video, which I watched it maybe like 6 times because there's so much information visually and auditory. So I'm like, I love this, but I wanted to talk to you about this. So here we are. So I know what ghosting is, but now you said there's zombieing and submarine. I've never heard the zombieing or submarine. So please give everybody a definition of each.
So every now and then the New York Times puts out an article written by some New Yorker who tries to share the new dating buzzwords and terms. I think sometimes they're usually a like boomer who is not dating themselves and just kind of trying to translate slang. I have never used those terms. I think I've put them as a, like, oh my gosh, people are coming up with more names for ghosting. Something I've also called out as a big trend is people trying to come up with new buzzwords. A lot of, influencers who are calling themselves dating influencers who want to be the person, the name behind the new theory or the buzzword so they can put it on merch. I think zombieing, that was something where it's like they ghost and they disappear and then they come back to life. So kind of like a zombie. So they disappear and then, a month later, hey, how have you been? It's like the guy you thought ghosted you. Oh, he's not a ghost after all. He came back to life. I think is that one. And then what was the other one that you mentioned? Submarine. Which one was that? I think that was like a zombieing light where it was like they disappear and without a trace, but come back kind of periodically and then ghost again.
Oh, like so it's like
it's like, oh, that's where you went. And then, the conversation doesn't continue. But some people call that breadcrumbing, which is like, there's a whole bunch of names for it, this kind of thing.
So submarine is more or less a repeated version of zombieing. And we've all been there. Have you ever been ghosted?
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I've been ghosted. And I will, as much as I would love to, solve that mystery, I don't think I ever will, but I think it's happened to everybody. And I'll admit, and I think too, I've ghosted. And sometimes I think part of, the thing that causes ghosting isn't so much that you have this person and you just are afraid of confrontation and this is your kind of sneaky way out of like rejecting them. Sometimes it's like you ghost someone because you didn't realize how interested they were. If they didn't say to you, or if they didn't text you and say, hey, like I had a great time, would love to see you again. Maybe you just assume they're not interested. Or maybe, you see a text that says hi and you've got a ton going on and you think I'll get back to this later. And then, more texts come in because it's 2023 and everybody's texting each other. And then all of a sudden 5 days have gone by and maybe it's too late to text that person. And was I really interested in it anyway? So I think that's also a thing too. Like ghosting isn't always like this intentional sneak off into the night. It's almost like a sign of the times. Like it's still unfortunate, but sometimes it isn't this like intentional evil act and whatnot.
Yeah. And back in the old days, it was called being stood up. I mean, it's always been there, but I remember it happening more often. It happened quite often with me. And I think I know I have an idea why people do, but like, what is your theory why people ghost people? Like, why do you think that happens so often?
So I do think people are terrified of confrontation. Like, I think there is absolutely the version of person who, went on a date with you, knows you're interested, and you just doesn't have the heart to say, I'm not interested in you. That I feel like that fear never goes away. Even strong people are terrified of communication. Maybe they had, the last person they were dating, like they thought they were doing the right thing and said, hey, I don't see this working out. And then that person came and threw tomatoes at their windows and they think, well, maybe people just want to be ghosted. Maybe I think there's, other reasons why people do it. I think people maybe don't realize they're doing it in the sense that they maybe assume the other person's not interested. Like my firm belief is that it takes two to be ghosted. So for it to really truly be ghosting, you have to text somebody and say, I would love to see you again. And they have to not respond to it. If you go on a date and you go home, even if you're someone where it's like, oh, I like a man to chase, and you don't say, hey, would love to see you again. If that guy doesn't text you, he didn't ghost you. He can easily assume you weren't that interested. I also think like if you don't say directly that you're interested, like if you just say, oh, thanks for a good night, or, just a, hey, how are you? Like, that doesn't necessarily like say, I want to see you again, and give someone like a compelling event to respond to. So I think there can be the assumption that, someone's not interested. I think one thing I've assumed too, and maybe it's just because I live in Austin or a big city. Sometimes I've just assumed like, like this guy will be fine. We live in a big city. A lot can happen in a week. Why give a rejection this person didn't ask for if he didn't specifically say, would love to see you again? Like, why should I send that text saying like, hey, I don't see, I had a nice time, but I don't see this working out. Like why put somebody at a net negative and give someone something they didn't ask for? So like those types of things. And then sometimes I think too, people ghost because it doesn't necessarily close the door the way a rejection text would. If you don't ghost somebody, or if you don't directly reject somebody, maybe they want to see you again. But if the second you say, oh, I'm not interested, like you can't just go back to that person if, a month down the road, you're lonely and, who could I call in my phone? You can easily, if you just, ghost, maybe this would be zombieing. A month later, you can hit up that person and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I did this to you. I was so busy with work. I had, this thing happened to me, let's pick this back up. And it kind of leaves the door open in a way, I would say too.
Yeah. The worst, I remember being ghosted the first time. And it's funny because you just mentioned like, I guess it hadn't happened to me personally, but you can be ghosted. You can go on a date, right? And it just not be a great date. And instead of rejecting them, like you just mentioned, and saying it's not going to work out, you just disappear. So there's one date and they're gone. I always assumed that it was a ghosted, like you were meeting somebody and you never met them. Because that's what happened to me. Like we matched up on Wednesday. We're talking Wednesday through Friday. We're going to go out Saturday. And she's sending me pictures of her outfit, what she's going to wear. I'm like, great, I can't wait to see you. And then it's Saturday, because it was weird, because just to give women the peace of mind that I dated on that date, the day of the date, I would say, hey, good morning. We're still on for this morning, right? I just want for tomorrow. Let me repeat that. We're still on for this evening, right? And they'd be, yeah. I'm like, okay, we're 7:00. I'll be there. FYI, I'm leaving my house. I would just give them reassurance that I'm not going to ghost them, because I know how that feels. Anyway, she says, I'm on my way. I got an Uber. I'll be there in 5 minutes. I'm down the street. I'm like, oh, I'm at the bar. I'm waiting for you. She never showed up. Just gone. And I'm like, if you ghosted me, that's fine. But did you die? Just let me know you're safe. That's all I said.
That's what's crazy. Like, I think like that's such a bold move, because that's one thing I feel like you see less of is people getting like stood up. Like, I think because people have phones and whatnot, like I feel like you see a lot more excuses that you think maybe aren't necessarily true, but like something that gets somebody going somewhere, I think like is universally seen as significantly more terrible because there's no excuse for it because they have a phone the way that,
right.
people now, or the way that people back then didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have a theory because, again, I dated in the 90s, right? And I got married in 99 and started dating in 2016, that story. And I can compare the two different worlds and eras, right? So it's like, I remember meeting women in this era, this new age, was so lazy. All I had to do was download an app, create a profile, and boom, they're coming to me in a sense. If the app profile is strong, they're coming to me, and it was very successful. I'm like, oh my, this is it? I don't have to go anywhere. I didn't have to have game. I didn't have to approach anyone, smell good, look good, ask them to dance by. None of that. All that courting was gone. It's just, here we are. It's so impersonal. And like I said earlier, I just did not like the fact that my first impression was text. I preferred making eye contact, saying, hello, my name is Rudy. That's the way I was groomed and raised, right? So here it's different. And I remember it being really impersonal. And I think that's really why people are ghosting so much, because the person they're talking to is just a profile saved on their phone. Oh yeah. With maybe a picture. It's a text thread. That's it. There's no human interaction.
Yeah. It's a digital baseball card is what I've called them.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And I think that's why it's so easy to separate themselves with this person, because they never looked them in the eye. They never were with them, face to face. And I think it's harder to do that versus the other. So I don't know. It's just very impersonal. The whole courting part of meeting people. So it's so odd nowadays, and it's so lazy. Yes. Guys don't have to put any effort. They can just put some handsome photos up there. They can be a total jerk, but that doesn't matter because, the profile is selling them. So it's so lazy.
It's so lazy. And I think, yeah, the easiness of it all has caused laziness. Right now, back at, like, even if you look back at the 90s, if you went to, you got somebody's phone number, and you called them on the phone, that person took up the whole phone line. If you wanted to talk to another person, you had to hang up the phone with them. If you wanted the possibility of another person calling you, you had to hang up the phone. Now you can meet and talk to dozens of people at a time, at no cost to you, at no effort to you, without ever leaving your couch. So people are talking to more people just because they can. And I think that results in people, keeping things going with people they're not totally interested in or excited about. Because why not? You can. It's easy. So, and I think that causes like that disposability. I think that causes people to cling to things that they wouldn't cling to if back in the day they gave somebody a phone number at a bar. That would just be the person that didn't call you. Now it's like you get the hey text, and it's easy to respond to a text. And then they're like, why isn't he emotionally available? He's not responsive. It's like, well, because he can. It doesn't take much effort to send a text. So you see so much more of like people saying there's so many options, but there are also a lot of like non-options because it's lazy people. Yeah,
totally. And I want to get your opinion from a female perspective. And I'm going to give you the guy reason, because I had a lot of women say, why is he ghosting me? Why is he, I guess the term is zombieing right now, right? Like, why is he just ghosted me, and then 3 months later he comes back? And this is the male perspective, because I'm guilty of doing this myself, and I know about the guys who did it. If a guy ghosts a woman, it's because, as we mentioned earlier, people are dating multiple people. If you're ghosted, you're probably plan C or B, and plan A really came through and confirmed that evening. So that's why you were ghosted, because his attention is totally focused on this other woman. And then he's going to date her. It's going to go on for a couple months, and it didn't work out. And guess what? I'm gonna go to plan B. Oh, she didn't respond. Let me go text plan C. So that is why you're getting that, hey, what are you doing text on Saturday at 9 p.m. at night, is because we're just kind of going down our options. And it's sad, but that's the modern dating game, and a lot of people are doing that. So when a woman ghosts a guy, or a woman does the zombieing, is it the same thing?
I think so, because I think like I said, how it's, ghosting isn't this intentional sneak off into the night. Sometimes you get caught up with one person. Like there's some people that are very sparky people, like what I've noticed. And so sometimes it's like that person's just taking up all your time, and all of a sudden, 3 days have gone by, and you don't necessarily want to reject those other people. You've just been so busy with this other person. And then if it doesn't work out, like, I feel like that's why it's always like that 1 month mark or that 6 week mark. Cause that's usually a lot of times where people are like, okay, like, what's this going to be? We've kind of done all the dating things, like, are we going to shit or get off the pot kind of thing? So I think that's why you see it a lot then. But yeah, it totally is. It's like, I pursued somebody, I put all my chips in the middle, didn't win. And there were still some nice people that I had a nice time with. What are they up to? Right. But it's unfortunate, because if you're someone's first choice and they're kind of your backup plan, it causes a pretty frustrating situation for someone.
Okay. And this wasn't on the bullet points I sent you, but I want to ask you, I always tell people, and again, based on my faults and my mistakes, is like, being emotionally vulnerable too soon, too fast. I always preach that you want to at least get to know the person. I know you can get infatuated with them, and there can be this intense chemistry that between the both of you, that the sex could be great, but you don't know them. You truly don't. And I used to say 3 months is a reasonable time frame to see who they are. And after trial and error in many dates, I found out that was wrong. Now I go to the 6 month or year to truly be vulnerable and to let go of those walls we all have inside and protecting ourselves, because no one wants to get hurt. We've all been hurt, and we don't want to go through that again. So I always tell people, like, hold off from intimacy if you can, but if you don't, protect your heart and just take the time to get to know them before you say I love you, or saying something about or planning marriages, because I love you is a powerful statement, and it can mean a different thing to a different person. It can mean something different to you, to them. So you have to be careful with that word, especially that word. But what is a reasonable time frame with your experience and all your research that you would say is a good amount of time to be vulnerable with your love with somebody to do that?
I think, I think I love you. That's obviously, I think that's a committed relationship thing. I think the people that you are actively going on dates with, there's no commitment yet. Like those are not, do not give your I love yous to those people. That takes time, and, being exclusive with someone, having like a foundation, for, that relationship, and having a real relationship too, to, even kind of go down that road. I think it's tough because I think it's so much more of an art than it is a math. Like, I don't think there's a full checklist in terms of like,
that is a great way to put it.
Because it's such a feeling that like a lot of people can't really quantify. I think, like some people say, once they've met the parents, they've passed the parent check, they've passed the sibling check, I've passed their parent check. I do think, I think it's a feeling, but I also think that, sometimes when you realize what that feeling is, that changes like over time. Like, I think when I was obviously a 16-year-old kid falling in love for the first time, I think that was obviously just sparks and lust. And as I've gotten older, it's like, that's just being attracted to somebody. Now, I think usually it's like, for me, it has been kind of the 3 month mark. And maybe that's because of just, I wonder the reason for that. I don't know if it's because I, bring someone into my life or integrate them into my life like relatively quickly, in the sense that they're, my sister lives locally, or like I have a strong group of friends, and they're starting to come to these like events or gatherings with me.
A wedding or something like that.
Stuff
that's one of the big tests.
So where you see like the full scope of who they are. So that's kind of been the marker for me. But I've always known for probably like a month, maybe even since the beginning, before I said anything, because it was like, there's something changes when you say it aloud, I would say. Yes.
Or during the act of, having sex, is like, did you really mean that? Like, then you're like, if you heard it and you do say it back when you don't want to, it's like, it's such a messy, complicated, space. And, I can understand why people don't want to date anymore. If it's so knowing that it's a numbers game, knowing that the person you're talking to could be talking to numerous people. What are the odds of me winning them or him or her over? It can be messy. It really can. So I can understand their frustration.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. You mentioned types of exclusivity on your presentation, and I didn't know there was many or more than one type. So can you go on and elaborate on that?
Yeah. So, and these are kind of made up classifications, just like everything I do is, but I do think it kind of relates to a lot of situations that, different versions of exclusivity. I think there's obviously a version, and I call it like intentional. There's a version of exclusivity where it's, you and I are going to be in an exclusive relationship, whether you call that, boyfriend, girlfriend or not. You've agreed to it because the two of you like each other and, want to get to know each other. And this is about your connection. There's another version of it, and I call it logistical, which is around things like, you don't want to get STDs, things like that. So, I don't want to sleep with someone who's sleeping with other people because I don't want to, I don't want to get an STD or have like that kind of thing happen. So it's like a logistical thing, but it's not because I like you, not because I'm committed to you, but just because I don't want to, any kind of health risk to me. Sometimes people try to use that logistical to get to the intentional. I think like, like I don't do this. Like it's all about the STDs, but it's also kind of a way of testing if, they like the other person.
Yes.
And then there's the final one I just called default, because it's hard enough to find somebody who you want to date and wants to date you, or get to know. Sometimes people are just exclusive by default because you don't have anybody else. That they might look to the door's open if they want to talk to someone else, but as of that moment, you're the only one. But it's just a default thing.
Yeah, there's so many when you said logistic exclusivity, I was thinking you moved in, or like you're exclusive and are now sharing at least somewhere. So now you have some debt or some contractual obligation outside of your relationship that's keeping you there. I have you read the book Attachment Styles? I think it's called Attachment. There's like 3 types. Attach. Yeah, there you go. I halfway through it, but it does make sense. And I did notice, and it kind of ties to my experience as well, because when I went out there after my divorce, I didn't need anybody to make me happy. I loved my life. I loved who I was, my job, my career, my hobbies, my side gigs. I just wanted to see if anybody wanted to join my happiness. So I didn't come off needy. So I had a very successful dating life. And out there, when I was dating many women and meeting other guys, because, making new friends, one thing I noticed, and I want to get your thoughts on this, I noticed there is just a lot of lonely people out there.
Yes.
And are just dating so they're not alone and settling. And that broke my heart. Are you seeing a lot of that?
Yeah. And I think there's also just a lot of people that don't necessarily know what they want. And because I think if you ask people too, and I've noticed this, where a lot of people, if they're in a situation where they're seeing someone, they want it to be like a relationship or something like that. Like when they want to start that conversation, they ask, what are we? I always think that's a bad way to start the conversation.
Ooh, yeah, don't do that.
I think it's like stating what you think you are. Like, what do you think you are, and see if they're on the same page. Because if you ask, what are we? It just like keeps an open-ended question when you want a direct response. But I think part of the reason, because like when people have said, oh, it's you ask, what are we? But then I say, a better solution is to say, like, I want you to be my boyfriend, or I want you to be my girlfriend. People kind of like shudder at that. They're like, well, I don't know about that. And I said, well, then why are you asking what are we, and hoping they say it? Hoping they say it's a relationship. Like, do you actually want a relationship with this person if you can't just say aloud, I want you to be my boyfriend or girlfriend? So I think a lot of people are just really like confused about what they do want, like questioning themselves. And I think kind of the sign of the times, and just, dating apps, the, multitude of people is contributing to that. And I think also just for millennials, like a lot of like the state of the world has always been a pretty insecure place. Like, especially if you think of like men are told like, this is how you be a man. It's you have the job, you have the, everything that you
be
have
6
that
foot
foundation,
tall, all that other BS,
all that BS, like where it's like you have the foundation of, the job, the money, the status. And then, currently in the state of the world, no job feels secure right now. So it's like, there's kind of that insecurity of like, am I enough? Or like, you don't feel as confident in your decisions because so much else is up in the air in your life. I think is part of it as well.
And I'm 46. And to be honest, that self-worth, knowing who I am, what I want, what I can contribute, I didn't have that feeling till 34. So I can only imagine the pressure and stress that young men and women have with the dating world, as complex as it is, as what we're showcased with all these bullshit alpha bro podcasts that I can't stand. You have to be wealthy, 6 foot, abs, all this other bullshit. It can be so disheartening. And it can really just kill somebody's spirit. Like, I didn't even get a chance to play in the game, and I'm already out. I'm sitting on the sidelines. It's so disheartening that that's why my content, yours and other people that I follow, I love the message that we're getting. We're trying to educate people. We're not trying to exploit people's fears and confusion for financial profit, like these alpha bro podcasts that I can't stand. I went on this live last night. I went on this whole hour rant why they suck. But I saw one of your videos that you didn't name the name. You don't have to name the name, but you were invited to go to one, but it was like a negative, horrible experience, right? Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so it was interesting. It wasn't one of the big ones that are the 2 big ones that are like the whatevers and the fresh fruit is what I call them. It wasn't one of those. It was something, and I think it was a newer program by someone who makes more general like how to be an alpha man type content. But it was virtual. And the invite, I thought, and I don't know if it was a spray and pray style invite, they hired an assistant for $10 an hour on, Upwork or something.
Or Fiverr.
But yeah, something like that. But it was the way it was presented. It was, here's the name of it. They said, what his name was, like, he's starting a new show and he would love to have you on to discuss. And I think it was modern dating topics from a male and female perspective. Or he said like the opportunity will be to, obviously discuss your feelings on modern dating trends and issues from both a male female perspective, like share your perspective on relationships. And then it also, of course, like said, like the number of like followers and exposure and stuff like that. I think that that's totally normal. And yeah, he just said, if you want to come on, like we shoot these on Fridays. He didn't specify that they were like lives. And, would love to have you. And it sounded like the way it was written too. It sounded like, something that, the average, podcaster creator that you had what I think is a totally, healthy view on dating and relationships would invite. So it felt very like, it felt very like I was like, okay, like, I kind of got the vibe there was this like alpha bro view, but I would be, if it was like a two-way conversation with someone who, was open to a conversation, I would love to pick that person's brain and see like, what do they actually mean and how serious are they? I would have that conversation. But yeah, I went ahead and looked up the creator and on YouTube, I couldn't find anything, but then I went to like the lives. Oh yeah, it was also framed as a podcast, which it's not a podcast. Went to the, clicked on lives and it looked like he'd done 2 in the past 2 weeks. And it was like, okay, like it looks like there's 5 or 6 girls on this. And is this what he's talking about? So I sent to because I'm not like, I think even if you're having a totally positive conversation, like 6 guests who don't know each other from all different backgrounds, like that doesn't make for a good conversation. Everyone's going to talk all over each other. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. So I go and I DM the person that messaged me and said, is this the type of program you're referring to? Like, this isn't one of those where, everyone yells, talks all over each other or anything like that. I kind of like started to watch one. I couldn't really get a vibe for it. But then, yeah. And he's like, oh yeah, this is it. He's like, but here's some screenshots from some of our past guests. Like they've all said he's so respectful. Like we're trying not to be like one of those other podcasts, like, going, like giving the list of like all of that. And I just decided against it. It was also that he was shooting these on like Fridays at 6 o'clock. And I'm not doing that on Friday. My Fridays are too valuable for that.
Yeah, it's family time or going out time.
Yeah, exactly. So I declined it. I was like, I don't really, this sounds like it's too much like gender issues. It's just too many people, know. And then, of course, how the YouTube algorithm works, was on YouTube trying to, find something to watch. And it popped up like the episode that I would have been on. And it was your stereotypical, like, fresh fruit, whatever podcast stuff. Like it started off with we're going around the horn and ranking ourselves on scale of 1 to 10. God. The guests ranked themselves. He didn't rank himself. Pick a celebrity you think you're just as attractive as. He's going through and asking their relationship statuses. There was one woman on there who was, a devout Christian, who said, who's 28, unmarried, and he, why aren't you married? It's because nobody picks you if you're not married by 25. Like it's never going to happen. There's a study out there that says it, and that's not what the study says. I've found that study. It says something totally different. And it was just a big clusterfuck. And like that girl ended up like logging off, but it was weird. There was one girl on there, I think, that had an OnlyFans. All of these podcasts too. It's like OnlyFans isn't a dating issue. Aside from, if I wouldn't know what OnlyFans was if it wasn't for TikTok, no one in my personal life has one. And just the fact that it just keeps coming up on these dating podcasts, like it's something you can't get away from. I think that's like, if you keep running into OnlyFans, like maybe take a look in the mirror, because I barely hear anything about it except from TikTok. Right. And I think if you're stumbling across it, you're probably looking for it. So it was just very like, I also just felt like bait and switch. And I think that's why like there were some guests on there that I think were very clearly surprised by what they were asked to be on, people that were clearly trying to grow like on social media, that maybe hashtag dating once or twice and told a story that, would not want to be on something like this, like would, run away screaming if they heard from a fresh and fit or whatever, that were sort of like bait and switched into this. Cause it's like, if you're trying to be like a fresh and fit, like, tell people what they're getting themselves into. And yeah, you're going to lose, a big demographic of people, and there's going to be a certain type of person that's willing to go on that. But if that's the type of content you want to make, like you got to be upfront. Yeah.
And I'm sorry you went through that experience. And again, imagine I'm very vocal. And if I had been bait and switch, I would have just made it very clear on air that no, I'm not being part of this, and I would leave, because I haven't been invited to one of those shows, nor will I accept an invite if I was invited to them, because I think they're trash. I think they're doing more harm than good. They're just fueling the hate and divide that we have in the U.S. And they know their demographic is a guy, a small pool of guys, maybe bordering on the incel community, right? But they hate women, and they're all red pill guys, and they're using the OnlyFans body count lingo to discredit and rate them as low value women. So what do? They bring OnlyFans models, and they're exploiting the OnlyFans models so they can put them all over the thumbnails, get the guys to watch the entire time. And it's so insufferable for me to sit through those because I'm reading the chat because I want to see a taste of the tone of the community. And all you see is insults in the chat. They're comparing, hey, you look like Mia Khalifa, you look like a porn star, all this. But then I found out, because I know people who've actually been on the show, these same guys who are insulting them are following them and subscribing to their OnlyFans account. So It's a contradiction. It's stupid.
It's so stupid. And I think it really preys on, the insecurity of men who are struggling with dating. Yeah. And, they basically frame themselves as like, hey, we're your friends. Like, we're looking out for you. And it takes, men that are already struggling, pushes content in front of them that will make them more miserable. And, ultimately does way more harm than good for their dating life. I guess if I could like share a story, and this might get kind of dark. I don't want to, maybe it's a trigger warning kind of thing to put in front of us. But I do have a particular disdain for the Whatever podcast, and where that comes from. So before living in Austin, I grew up in the Ventura, California area. Lived in Santa Barbara before moving out to Austin. Went to college in like San Luis Obispo. Graduated in 2014. Whatever podcast, they're headquartered or based out of Santa Barbara. They started in 2012 as a prank video YouTube channel. They did a lot of videos that were very Nelk Boys style. I had one family friend that ended up like in one of their prank videos. They had two girls wandering around the city asking, do you want to have a threesome with us? And he said, yeah. And it was a big prank. It was really funny. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But stuff like that. That was them in 2012. So something that happened at the University of California, Santa Barbara in 2014, almost 9 years ago today. There was a very tragic school shooting. It was, I don't even want to say the name of like the shooter, but it was somebody who subscribed to the, manosphere red pill type content. It was before any of these types of podcasts existed, but there were, in written form, the red pill forums on Reddit, like people just egging each other on, sharing terrible stories. Memorial Day weekend in 2014, he planned to, shoot women inside a sorority house. They didn't let him in, open fire in a street corner. One of the women that was killed there was, close friends with some people I'm really close with. And because I lived in Santa Barbara, a lot of my former coworkers, a few of them had survived that shooting. My sister went to UCSB. She was with me, thank God, that weekend. I remember when she got the call. And, just the fact that something like that happened in Santa Barbara, that was so horrible and tragic from someone that was, fueled by this like red pill type content, how the Whatever podcast, who, kind of died down after, Whatever is what they were called, 2012 doing prank videos. They kind of laid dormant. It was founded by the same guy who's running the podcast right now, Brian Atlas. And then, they see the success, the money of fresh fruit, and then they turn Whatever into the Whatever podcast. And I'm sure they're making good money off that, but how you can make a podcast like that with that type of content, targeting that type of audience that's struggling, that close to where something horrible happened. Like, I don't know how they can like sleep at night. I just have a particular disdain for that.
Oh my God. You and I are cut from the same thread because I've said the same thing. I'm in Texas, and obviously you're not in Austin now, but we had the shooting in the Allen Mall just a couple of weeks ago. Then Uvalde is 20 minutes to my left. Mm-hmm. And you look at all the shooters, and again, I'm not blaming the podcast, but the red pill space, the whole ideology is fueled with just hate. Mm-hmm. And when you see these young men who are doing these shootings, and for whatever reason, if it's political, religious, or just a hatred for women, I could not live with myself to preach and just spew that hate to millions of people like Pearl, Fresh Fit, whatever. They're banking, they're making money. But again, it's based off at what cost? I know they don't give a shit. I know they don't, because money in their end is more or less the important rule off factor. But me as a I have 3 kids, 2 boys and a daughter. My daughter just went to college. I could not live with myself as a content creator selling out and just selling that message, because my demographic on YouTube is all 18 to 35 men. And if I wanted to sell out and just spew that content, I can make money and all that, but it's not worth it. No. Our words have power. We have to be very careful with that, because why contribute to the divide and hate? Because I could not live with it myself, as you said. I couldn't.
Yeah, it's horrible, and they're putting just very specific types of people who are coming on there for attention to share stories that are just very few and far in between, like confirming these guys' fears that, oh my gosh, all these women hate you and you're worth nothing, and see, look how terrible they are, when really, like, women aren't like that. Like, there's the average woman that you go outside and meet, like, doesn't have an OnlyFans, like
Right.
maybe she would like to be treated like she likes a guy to pay for the first date. She's not after your wallet. She thinks it's nice. Like, that's kind of the average woman. And you're kind of putting it in these guys' heads that, no, it's terrible. They all hate you. Why bother even trying? Keep watching our podcasts. By the way, you'll, when you're older, women will be attracted to you, and all these women rejecting you will end up, ugly, single, and alone. And you'll have your fresh pick of 22-year-olds when you're 38 years old, and just keep watching our podcast until then. And it's very, very toxic and very scary. And I think, it's teaching, social skill, the opposite of social skills that I think are really having a terrible impact on young men. Yeah.
And like I said, I have a very honest conversation with my son. My other son's 6 months, so he's still a baby, but my son is 16, and we talk about sex. We talk about dating all the time. And I show him examples of what not to listen to. And you're right. These young guys, I'm not 6 foot. I don't have a chance. I'm 5'9". I've shrunk into 5'8" because I'm getting older. And apparently you shrink when you get older, but that never was a problem. Maybe there was 20% of the women who didn't pursue dating me because I wasn't tall. That did happen. So there's women out there, who prefer taller men, but it never destroyed me. I'm like, okay, that's their preference. So what? I'm just going to move on to the next. No big deal. And a lot of guys are they're learning about the world and women and how their world is supposedly works through these podcasts. And again, they're sold this carrot that, hey, if you want to get these baddies, and the women that they know of that exist that are all over are the IG models, the OnlyFans models, or porn stars. That's all they know of women. That's how they learned about women, through social media, through like the worst examples ever. And they've never encountered any real world women. So when I get like these idiots who come on my page and say, all women suck, go leave the country. I'm like, well, where are you basing that information on, that opinion? You're going to leave the US as all women are trash. How many women have you dated? How old are you? They're 18. They haven't even left their mom's house. But apparently all women in the US are ugly and stupid. Modern women are trash. They're going to go overseas to find a woman. They have no life experience, and they're just being influenced by this trash that's out there. Exactly. And it's it's putting them in a really terrible mental state, rather than, going outside and talking to people and meeting people. Yeah. That's also that's the other thing too. And I think what's unfortunate about dating apps, and people have really put a lot of emphasis on, what people want on dating apps, who gets the most right swipes, and they think it applies to everybody in the world. I mean, right. Yeah, you do have to list your height on a dating app. Are there some people that go, ooh, 6 foot, right swipe? But maybe it's just because I'm 5'2". I don't know what 6 foot actually looks like. That's the thing I've learned. If you go out into go to a bar with a few guy friends, and you're a young guy, if the girl's talking to you, she's not getting out a measuring stick and going, how tall are you? She's fine with however tall you are, whatever it is. And I'm willing to bet, unless you're a taller woman who really knows your height well, most women don't really. They probably think they know what 6 foot is. They don't know what 6 foot is. Everyone rounds up or rounds down. Mm-hmm. Nobody really knows. And I think, going out in the world, getting off of the 4-hour whatever live stream, don't spend your money there. Don't spend the $5 to have your comment read aloud. Take that $5, go out with your friends, go to, whether it's like a bar of sorts, like something fun, concert, something fun, a festival.
Spend your money on it, put that money in your pocket and buy, a girl a drink and see what happens. Like, that's what you should do. And maybe you'll kind of fall on your face, sort of. It happens to all of us. But it's really not all that bad, especially if you've got like a real support system and real friends who care about you, who aren't trying to take your money, surrounding you, who have your best interest in mind, unlike, people who you have to subscribe to their course or their program, whatever it is. Mm-hmm.
And we've touched on the male piece and the young male demographic, but what about women? Like, what are women feeling and talking about, like at brunch with mimosas and with all these guys with this ideology growing on this other end? What are women talking about in their space?
Yeah, so there's a few of them, and I think there's a few I've noticed on TikTok. I do think there's that here's how to find a high value man types, which I can't stand. There's I think it's like Ask Nelly, where it's like, here's the 4 unfakeable traits of a high value man.
Yeah.
It's like, they've got to be making 6 figures or more, like just these very arbitrary traits. And that's sort of been pushed on to people. It's like, you've got to find this high value man. It's so funny because that advice, it feels like how to be an escort 101, because they're like, men don't care about careers. Here's how you find a rich man. Go to a fancy hotel bar, like linger at the bar and just wait for someone to come up to you. It's like, they're going to think you're an escort. But and they really fuel that. And it was really sad. I noticed like the other day, and I think it's this woman who's like in her early 40s, like people kept tagging me in it. And I was like, I don't want to like, say anything to like come down on this woman because I feel kind of bad. Early 40s who'd never been married, done really well for herself in her career, still single. And, she's following this type of content, trying to find a boyfriend, doing day in my life stuff. And she's using the buzzwords like the high value man, like, oh, I'm trying to be more feminine, like, bought some new clothes. Like I've been following this person's advice. And, I don't know that it's helping her. And I think it's also like pushing her in the direction of being somebody she's not. Because I think people should, try to be the best version of themselves, but not someone they're not.
Absolutely.
Like, I think if you're a successful woman and whatnot, like you shouldn't stop doing that to go linger at a bar. Like, maybe take that success to like meet connections, meet people around you, like meet people that you have like-minded interests, like versus, staying at work until 10 o'clock, like, find the, museum you're interested in going to and see who's there. Like, right. I think that's like, the better way of doing things. I think there's, that version, the high value man version. And then of course there's the more traditional influencer podcasters. They're not necessarily like, I don't want to say like, I don't know if it's like a call her daddy, but like, if you think of like the Tinkses, like they're in LA or in New York, they sort of became a dating guru because they were an influencer already and people were interested in their dating lives because they went on some dates with a celebrity. And then all of a sudden they were giving dating advice and now they have a dating podcast. And those are frustrating because they are sharing a totally unrelatable experience for women who are dating. I think those target a little bit younger of an audience. Like I think Tinks is very much that like recent college grad, 22, just moved out to a new city after college. But very much like, Tinks, who has very wealthy parents who went on some dates with Diplo and lives in her own mansion in LA. Her version of dating is a lot different than, the girl who just graduated University of Missouri. And she's telling them, every guy puts women into a box upon meeting them. So, just, go sleep with them right away because it doesn't matter anyway, kind of stuff. It's like, no, Tinks, like maybe you're older, your relationship with sex, but like, don't put this influence on people. So it's very like superficial and like LA style dating advice. Nothing that I think, pushes like stuff that maybe feels scary the way that the alpha bro ones do, but it's definitely superficial. It's definitely toxic. It's pushing women in the wrong direction. It's pushing them to value the wrong things. Like there was a whole trend where it was like, it was, men who do dinner dates or nothing, like no coffee dates, no drink dates. If he's a scrub, if he's not doing a dinner date. And so I think that's terrible advice. I think, first, like you're going to get, if you find yourself on a dinner date with someone you're not excited about, you're stuck there. You can't just get up. And then also it's like, when it comes down to, dinner, like you want to like fall, like I don't want to say fall in love, but you want to make a connection with a person, not a restaurant. And I think dinner can do that. Like, I think, kind of taking the frills out of it, grab a coffee, do a walk around the park, don't go to Starbucks. But, pick a time where it's, a coffee shop that has the farmer's market next to it, grab a coffee and go on a walk, or, the fun cocktail bar that you've been wanting to try. Grab a cocktail, if it doesn't go well, it's one drink. But, things like that versus like a 2-hour dinner date ordeal where there's, food and I think I really hate that advice. And it should be about person first, like put the money in your pocket for the nice third date if things work out versus, dinner date first.
Yeah. I've seen a few of those, and I don't agree. Again, they're just as bad as the podcast that we just talked about, but not as toxic, right? But it's really just teaching young women that, hey, use your sexuality, use your beauty to take advantage of get the most you can. dinners, trips to Dubai, whatever they're doing, or yachts, whatever. You're using your sexuality to get you in these spaces, but that there's no substance there. There isn't, and there's going to be consequences to those visits and those types of environments you're putting yourself in. I do know there's one, I forget her name, but she's preaching that if your man isn't taking care of you, if he doesn't like spoil you and give you a mommy tuck and all these things, then you're just wasting your time. Go for these high value men. And it's idiotic. I mean, some of us are very pretty and, are privileged to be able to do that and pull that space, and hey, good for you, but not to the masses. And to teach that type of like method and way of thinking is just only making the situation worse. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I have heard of that before. And yeah, no dinner on a first date. No, it's always drinks or coffee or something, but because you get to talk to them and get to know them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. Well, I have one last question for you. And this is a question I ask everybody, right, on the podcast, because my platform is all based on my mistakes. I made tons of them and I learned from them, right? So my question, Charlotte, is this: what is the biggest mistake you've ever made, and what did you learn from it?
Oh gosh. I'm trying to think if I can call one out.
Okay.
Yeah, and this isn't necessarily dating specific, but I feel like it could be you could tie it to that. I worked for an incredible company. My first real job out of college, I worked there for 5 years. Software company, moved up the ladder in marketing. The company went public. It was getting so big, and everyone was like enticing. Via LinkedIn, all the recruiters were saying like, come. Here's this new offer. Here's a big shiny new title. I made the decision to leave. Went to one company, it wasn't what I thought it was, kind of got shuffled around, then, ended up getting recruited to another, which I liked, but it still wasn't the same as that old company. I wish I'd stayed, because I look back and I see sometimes people will be there enjoying themselves, like, really growing. They had the growth that I thought I wasn't able to get because I kind of felt a little bit spoiled at the time. And yeah, it was one of those where it was like the grass wasn't always greener. And luckily, like I'm kind of like in the final stages of an interview to go back. I'm really, really excited. But I think sometimes it's like, especially like you think of like dating apps and like you're wondering, you have a great date, but what else is out there? I think I probably wouldn't have left if I didn't have, a phone that showed me all these different like companies and all these things they were doing. So that was one of those really big grass wasn't greener, like you don't know what you've got till it's gone type things. And yeah, that's work. But sometimes when you find a place that like feels really good, that's work, like hang on to it, because yeah, like that's hard to find. Yeah,
I've shared. That's a great answer, by the way. Wow. I don't want to almost like tether to that, but to my lessons that I've learned, my fiance knows this. I made videos about it. I got hooked on the dating scene because I just had great success on the app. So having 3-4 women, that I was talking to, sometimes I had 2 dates on Saturday, like one at 6 o'clock in the evening, and then she went home at 10, and then I went out with the other one at 12. So I got hooked to the variety and the shelf life of that toxic one of the dating life. Most of the dating relationships I had were like a month or two until they imploded. Somebody brought up a red flag, and hey, forget it, and we're done. Then I met my fiance, and I remember, who the hell is this? Like, no, she's different. She's lying. She's full of crap. I'm going to catch the red flags. There were no red flags. And 5 months in, I found myself bored, and I was trying to self-sabotage it. I need to get out here and go back and get the variety again. And I go, you know what? I'm not going to do that. And I told her, look, I think I'm bored, and I don't know if it's me or you, but I think I'm bored. And she goes, well, what have you experienced before? Why are you bored now? Because I go, honestly, we're not fighting. Things are great. And she goes, oh, you're confusing peace with boredom. And I'm like, oh my God, you're right. So I had to relearn that. And again, instead of thinking the grass is greener, I go, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm glad I was honest with you, but I'm gonna stay. And I'm sorry that I mentioned this, but this is how I feel. And now we're engaged. And I almost left something. Thank you. I almost left something wonderful because of the idea of what's out there. The grass is greener, and I'm glad I didn't do it.
Well, I'm glad you didn't either. Yeah, it's funny. There's a great like Parks and Rec episode where that's the plot, and it's a Ron Swanson quote, like where he tells Donna, don't confuse drama for happiness. Like the music teacher that you're dating is the right man for you. Like cut this out. And I think that's also important because everyone talks about the spark. I don't know. Oh, I didn't feel a spark. Like, I think, feelings of security and whatnot, like, don't run away from those because they feel quote unquote boring. I found like a drama or a relationship without, the crazy stories tends to be the best one.
And it's also how we learn love. I mean, because now that I went to therapy and I deep dive, it's kind of how I learned love through my parents and what I saw growing up. So it's how somebody learns love and what they think is normal also ties to what their relationship is now. So if they are bored, maybe they have to do a self-evaluation, say, hey, maybe I am messed up and I have to go back and reevaluate all my relationships to see where this stems from. But yeah, I totally agree. And this was a great conversation, Charlotte. And where can people find you outside of TikTok?
Yeah, so TikTok is just at Welcome to the Peasant Party. Have an Instagram kind of tied to the same thing. If you're not on the Clock app, I try to move those over to Reels. Generally, I think that's where you can find me. TikTok, I would say, is the best bet. There's like the link in bio to any kind of sub formats of the content. Really trying to start getting write-ups of everything I've done posted. All the visuals that kind of you catch a glance of on the screen. Getting those posted, turn them into infographics. But yeah, a little bit of like almost like admin work there that I really need to like sit down and do.
Well, please continue to do what you do. Again, I'm an instructional designer and I value the time and the effort in your PowerPoints because they're so informative. And I'm calling it now. In about a year, maybe a year and a half, you're going to be doing a TED Talk on one of those slides.
I think that would be really fun. I would love to do that. Like the TEDx ones that come to town. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, it's going to happen. I'm manifesting that right now. So yeah,
I'll do the same. Thank you.
Continue to do great work. And thank you so much.
Thank you.